The pursuit of answers by individuals and small groups with a personal passion has done more to influence medicine than any double-blind study. Strapped by compartmentalization and limited by a strict standard of care, the current medical system cannot effectively treat the multiple complex systems of an individual's body. This is why the professionals at Scala Precision Health have the ability to research, educate, and shine a light on options that might not otherwise be considered.
Hello and welcome. I'm Trent Duncan, part of the team at Scala Precision Health. It's true, small groups like ours have had the ability to make great strides beyond the boundaries that confine traditional medicine. Why? Because traditional medicine is a business, and at the end of the day, they need to do two things: protect their assets and make money. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, medicine should be customized to each individual based on biological markers, genetics, DNA, and even nutritional supplementation. After all, how can you truly treat the body without looking inside at what makes each of us unique? Well, that's what the team at Scala Precision Health does, and that's why we get answers for people at the 11th hour. So come with me and step outside the standard of care for a moment and meet the team at Scala Precision Health that developed a treatment protocol for locked-in syndrome, and more specifically, for John Michael. I am joined in the studio by the team of Chrissy Mifsud and Russ Scala to discuss the treatments they developed. Russ, locked-in syndrome is very rare, not to mention very difficult to treat. So tell us why you wanted to try and treat this, or basically why you think you could treat this.
Well, one of the things that I realized since 1984 is that every brain injury, every stroke patient is biochemically unique, and a lot of the treatment protocols don't focus on the individual. And since that time, obviously, my skill set has evolved, and I've worked with the leading research labs in the country. I put together treatment protocols for brain injury and PTSD as well as stroke patients over the last 10 years, and I thought that we might be able to shine some light on another area here for the folks.
I understand you have a relationship with some of the people involved. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, Clancy Bounds, first a friend of mine, alerted me to this situation a few months ago, and I started drilling down on the details. Scott Levitt is also a good friend of mine. He's a friend of the family, and obviously I know Mick Knight. So when I first heard about this from Clancy, I went back home and started pulling some of the research together on seeing what the treatment protocols were.
Chrissy, you helped write and research this report. Can you give us just a quick overview of why this is a little bit different than some of the treatments out there now?
Sure. Of course, we looked at standards of care with stroke victims, and what we've come up with is, first of all, it's tailored to the individual, in this case, John Michael. Secondly, it is multifactorial. Related, but thirdly is the brain is not treated in isolation. The whole body is treated as one. And fourth, we're talking about looking at the cellular level of function and the nutrition associated with that.
Gotcha. And I have a next slide here. So this is obviously the Mayo Clinic. The treatment protocol is very big, so that's what we compared it to. And this is the current standard of care for the Mayo Clinic. And this is some of the stuff that we put together for John Michael, correct? Can you elaborate on a couple of those things?
Yeah, if you look on the left side, we just went to the Mayo Clinic's website, and it said what to expect when you're going through stroke rehab, and that's what it has, those 4 areas. It's mostly physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, with a few experimental therapies thrown in there for good measure. And on the right, you'll see what I was just talking about, a customized protocol for John Michael, which includes how do you get brain cells to regrow, neurogenesis, looking at the mitochondrial level, again, cellular level, looking at nutrition, and targeting that nutrition to help the body heal.
So technically it's outside the standard of care, but why wouldn't you want to look at the individual on a biological level, right, when you're trying to treat them?
You got to understand that neurological centers and large facilities are a business, and doing this type of outside the standard of care takes time with each individual, and they don't have the time for that.
In that packet that you have, there's in the report, there's over 24 research articles that you cite, which are backed by actual physical research, but yet it's outside the standard of care, but yet they're backed by research that you have actually put into this report you put together for John Michael, correct?
You know, anytime we do a high-level intervention like this, we know that throughout history, anybody that moves in this area is going to get shot down by traditional medicine. So these guys are my friends, and they understand that we have an amazing skill set.
So let's get into this report a little bit. You talk about the mitochondria link here. So obviously everybody kind of learned about the mitochondria in 7th grade life science, but it's been a little while since then for some of us. So Chrissy, can you tell us exactly what the mitochondria are responsible for in the human body?
Sure. Mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. Okay. It's what creates energy from the food you eat. It basically powers everything. There are more mitochondria condensed in your brain, in your liver, in your muscles, but they are in every cell in your body, and there may be thousands in each cell in your body. They create energy from the food you eat, and through all the research that I was looking at, found out paper after paper that we know that mitochondrial dysfunction is responsible for neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Wow, that's big.
Absolutely. And when you look at Alzheimer's, for example, that's called diabetes of the brain. Well, that's because of the relationship that the mitochondrial dysfunction has with the way the body uses sugar. When the mitochondria does its thing, when it transforms food into fuel, using glucose as a fuel generates more free radicals and more inflammation in the on the cellular level than when the mitochondria uses fat for fuel. Actually, it produces less free radicals. So just at the very basic cellular level, that can be it can be affected by the food you eat, the nutrition that you have.
And that's where the oxidative stress comes in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like Russ says, the apple with the lemon juice. The lemon juice is an antioxidant. Okay. You put it on the apple, it doesn't turn brown. Same thing on the mitochondrial level with any inflammation. It's a free radical that is causing damage unless you have something to protect it.
Russ, you can actually measure the damage that's occurring in the mitochondria, correct?
Yeah, it's true. We're actually immersing ourselves in two different fields now, neurology and molecular nutrition and hormonal replacement therapy, and those fields don't talk to each other. So a lot of the neurologists that I actually sat down with were really amazed by what was going on at a cellular level. But if we think about it, the people that have recovered from strokes and locked-in syndrome, they believe that their mitochondria was at a very high level. And the mitochondria does something very interesting. It stimulates, if these are two neurons, it stimulates the development of neurons.
Okay.
Synaptic gap, it stimulates synaptogenesis, and it also helps with something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is the miracle grow for the brain. So on a cellular level, if we ramp up the mitochondria and have it function more efficiently, it will assist with the rehab in strokes, traumatic brain injury patients.
Wow. Very good. So now that we know what the mitochondria does here, we talked a little about how nutrition affects it. Let's go into the nutritional link here, and this is how you measure the functionality of the food that you eat, correct? Through the KRB cycle, right?
Exactly. A lot of new research is headed in this area about developing new brain tissue, everything from the diet that they put a stroke patient on to what goes inside a feeding tube. And again, this is all very, very new. A lot of people are not aware of it. If you're feeding a person that has a stroke a high amount of maltodextrin or high amount of carbohydrates, it's going to
sugar, right?
It's going to cause more inflammation, more free radical damage.
What we just talked about.
Right, exactly. If we switch what the patient is being fed over to a higher fat diet, adding some medium chain triglycerides, that fuel, those cells, those mitochondria in the brain will burn cleaner and will burn more efficiently and help with the development and help with the rehab process. So even what the patient is eating on a daily basis, think about it. He's laying in bed. He's mining nutrients from his own tissue. Yep. He's becoming deficient, all right? If we could, look at this and shine some light on this and test on a cellular level, maybe this will help with the rehab process.
Gotcha. And so the KRB cycle just measures the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, because all of your food, all your food that you eat is categorized into 3 categories: fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, right? And so talk a little bit about, you measure those, and you just measure the deficiencies of what's coming in, and then you increase that with other nutrients, correct?
Right, exactly. Like our laboratory is able to measure the mitochondrial dysfunction right now on a cellular level, and this is going to These are going to be the new treatment protocols for strokes and traumatic brain injury. So we could actually measure what's going on in the system mitochondria and how well they function to help develop new brain tissue to help, with the rehab process. This right here has never been done before, but it's where all the science all the studies that Chrissy put together is looking at this process on a cellular level.
So that's the nutritional link right there. So if your cells, your mitochondria are healthy, okay, then it's going to produce a healthy body, healthy repair process, correct?
Yeah, that's what the research shows.
So in addition to that, let's talk about the hormones now. Okay, we're going into some hormones. You mentioned a couple of hormones in your report here, the IGF-1, okay, HPA Axis, and the brain-derived neurotrophic factors, okay? So let's talk real quick about IGF-1 and then what it does for the body in the healing process.
Yeah, IGF-1 is it assists every cell in the body. It helps with the rehab process. A lot of the studies that Chrissy put together is looking at IGF-1. We know now that if IGF-1 is elevated, it will help develop new brain tissue. Will help with develop brain-derived neurotrophic factor for the stroke patient. So we focused on IGF-1. We're even in contact with a company right now that develops IGF-1 here in Orlando as a treatment protocol. I worked with my other brain injury patients using IGF-1 and enhancing IGF-1 to impact the brain tissue by looking at thyroid, adrenal function, testosterone, and growth hormone levels. Looking at the body multifactorially and ramping up those systems will impact the brain chemistry. This is another area that neurology has not immersed itself in yet, but we see we're in the middle of a paradigm shift right now. Treating the body multifactorially for brain injury, with the movie Concussion that just came out, with troops coming back from Iraq. All this is happening in real time right now. And the neurologists that I sat with and showed them this, they just said that, we're way ahead of the curve, that, their practice is a little too conservative for this, but they've gave me a lot of great feedback.
So am I correct in saying that the IGF-1 will help enhance the communication between the neurons?
Yeah, exactly. It'll not only enhance communication, but the combination of IGF-1, elevated mitochondria, will help grow new brain tissue and help elevate something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor to speed the healing process.
Wow, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, we're going to hit on the HPA axis. Okay, so the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. Chris, you could just touch on this multifactorial approach here real quick.
Right, well, the HPA axis, like we said before, this has to be multifactorial, and we have to look at all the systems of the body at once, and you can't leave out the HPA axis. That's your brain, your adrenal glands, and your thyroid. They all communicate with each other to manufacture the correct amount of hormones at the correct time, and you can't leave them out. You have to look at those, and luckily we can very easily measure all of them with testing.
Wow. So yeah, one's out of balance, it screws up the whole thing. So Russ, you actually measured this stuff, right?
Yeah, we, with the brain injury patients that I worked on, with the research that I've done on the war vets, and obviously being a paramedic, I've been wondering since 1984 why two brain injury patients are in the hospital, one leaves faster than the other. The HPA axis, anytime you have a traumatic brain injury or stroke, you lower all your hormone levels.
Wow.
Thyroid, adrenal glands, testosterone, and growth hormone levels. Well, doesn't it make sense that if during the rehab process, if we optimize the hormonal levels, if we optimize the HPA axis that isn't done a lot, if we optimize this area, we could help with the healing process? That's what the studies that Chrissy put together for. I mean, it shows that.
Absolutely. It's like you said, spider web, you pull one part of it, it affects the whole web.
Exactly.
You got to look at all the individual aspects. Okay, so let's touch on now the brain-derived neurotrophic factors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this stimulates the growth of new brain tissue, like you mentioned before. So talk to us a little bit about that.
We just, obviously neurology is changing in real time very quickly. The fMRIs allowed us to look inside the brain in real time, and it sort of changed the landscape in neurology. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor is basically the miracle growth of the brain that assists with development of new brain tissue, synaptogenesis, the veins and arteries that support the growth of new brain tissue. It's called vascular endothelial growth factor. All those areas are supported by IGF-1 in the mitochondria, and looking at the body multifactorially. Okay, we don't have to just treat the head. We have to treat the body, and every brain injury patient is different. Mm-hmm. Every brain injury treatment protocol needs to be customized to that individual. So when I was drilling down on this, I looked back. Obviously, locked-in syndrome is very rare, so I wanted to look at who were the people that survived locked-in syndrome, what were their age, the people that survived strokes that were able to have a normal functioning life. What did they do? what were their treatment protocols. So again, we looked at this at 60,000 feet, and then Chrissy and I and the team drilled down on a cellular level to compare and contrast the two, with the hopes of maybe shining some light in some other areas for McKnight.
No, absolutely.
And John Michael.
What you said, it comes back to the standard of care. If you know the folks that step outside the standard of care and take great strides on their own path have done more to change kind of the face of medicine, and that's the Jim Abrams story. Tell us a little about Jim Abrams' story.
Yeah, like I said, there's always small groups of people, like our little group right here, that make things happen. It's throughout history, and they get vilified and shot down a lot of times as being crazy. But Jim Abrams was a Hollywood producer, and this is really interesting, that his son was having, I think, 50 seizures a day, and he had 5 neurologists. And, he's listening to his neurologist. He was a Hollywood producer. He had, the pros from Dover on his team. And his son kept having seizures. Well, one of the neurologists recommended surgery. He had surgery on his newborn, and still the seizures persisted. Well, then he started doing research on his own. Mm-hmm. Sound familiar? And he found out the ketogenic diet, the high-fat diet, stopped seizures. So he took this ketogenic diet to the neurologists, and they shot it down. They didn't want to do it. He pulled the trigger and put his son on the ketogenic diet, and lo and behold, the seizures stopped within a week because the mitochondria uses fat more efficiently. So he knew that. So then he got upset, obviously, that something so simple is not being talked about, and this is where we live today. This is where medicine is today. You're not going to hear these things. But Jim Abrams started this Charlie Foundation, named it after his son, about how the ketogenic diet stopped seizures. And then he did a made-for-TV movie called First Do No Harm with Meryl Streep about this whole process.
Wow.
So throughout history, small groups of people have made amazing strides than universities and these prestigious institutions that are treating with the standard of care.
You can definitely tell the difference, 2011 and 2015.
What I learned over the 4-year period dealing with Lewis and the physicians and the neurologists is I was bringing this research into their offices, and they really didn't have time to do these customized treatment protocols. So then I figured out, well, I got to show these guys how to make money. If I show them how to make money and then plug in the treatment protocol, then it's a win-win, because this is a business. So I'm learning as I go too.
Well, it was amazing. You told me it was amazing how many people started listening once you could show them how they could make money with it.
Medicine is a business,
Just like anything else.
Yeah, right.
It's a business. At the end of the day, they have to make money and protect their assets too, which is also important.
Exactly.
You've successfully treated folks PTSD, brain injury, head trauma, traumatic brain injury, including Lewis Amabile. Okay, so let's talk a little about that. Tell us about how that case is similar to John Michael's case, and we'll actually go into a video here that we created for Lewis Amabile.
Yeah, the Lewis Amabile case was really, really interesting. Lewis Amabile, was on my program, and I had all his levels up. I had him, he was an athlete, he was on the hormonal program. He's, a business guy, high-functioning business guy. Well, one night he's driving his motorcycle without a helmet on, and he slams into the back of a van doing 60 miles an hour. He was pronounced dead on the scene, and he was flown to Orlando Regional Medical Center. And then I got the call, and obviously they didn't think he was going to make it, And what was interesting, I caught up with him like 6 months after the incident. As you could see, he was very depleted. But what was interesting in the beginning, since I had his IGF-1 levels up and I had all his hormone levels up and optimized, during his recovery in intensive care, like 3 or 4 doctors, and he remembers this, were saying they couldn't believe how fast he was healing.
Wow.
So again, I knew that I had to. This was tough. It took 4 years to rehab Lewis, and it took me 4 doctors. Going through 4 doctors, laying down the research, having them sign off on things. But what I gleaned from developing his treatment protocol is transparent across brain injury, stroke, TBI.
Wow.
It was an amazing story, and he's doing really well right now.